Please don't hit my line. Swear I don't even got time. Seem like everything fine. Whole life on my mind. Keep that money on side. Ready to pay any price. Please don't hit my. No, I'm not saying it twice. Is it just me or you blind? Might think I'm falling behind, but I'm watching all fall in line. I might just pop like surprise. I cannot fuck with these guys. I swear they kill my vibe. But they ain't.
The question is, do you think that Vancouver has a identity and culture issue? And if so, is it necessarily a bad thing?
I don't think so. I think people are just putting in like an artificial pressure of like, oh, okay, Toronto has a sound, why don't we have a sound? Things just like, oh, like LA has a sound, why don't we have a sound? And it's like, well, like if you look at any place geographically, it didn't all happen at the same time. There's different eras of it. Each place has its own sound. And I think that, Vancouver is still finding its sound and its identity. I don't think that there's a lack of identity or culture. I think that it is still growing. I think that it just hasn't fully formed yet. But I don't think it's something to be worried about or something that's a negative thing. In fact, I just look at it as a great opportunity because everyone that's involved right now is essentially pioneering what that identity and what that sound will be.
And not only that, there's like a confirmation bias or whatever you want to call it, because whatever hits, people are going to jump on that and that's going to be the sound, and then people will conform to that. So I think people just have to keep doing what they're doing and keep staying true to their own unique thing. And if something takes off and really hits and really is something that people can gather around, that will become the sound, because of the success. So, it's a chicken before the egg thing, I guess. It'll be interesting to see if and when that plays out.
Just to even add to that, I was going to say, like, the fact that we don't have, it's funny, we were just talking about this earlier, is a sense of identity in Vancouver is because it's so diverse here. Even compared to like Toronto, like you can't really label a quote unquote sound that's attached to Vancouver.
Can you label one in Toronto?
You could, in my opinion. Like there was that minute from like 2015, as you mentioned, up until like let's say 2018, where like you had The Weeknd and Drake become some of the biggest artists out of that city, and everything that not that followed it but was attached to it, like the Jazz Cardis and all that, kind of had that quote unquote Toronto sound, right? Even if you look at the indie acts, it was very much leaning towards an influence of hip hop, which was very interesting to see. But that's only in the past, like 2015 to 2018. And I think here, because of course Toronto is extremely diverse as well, but we have that sense of Vancouver being a big city with a small town population. There's so much cross-pollination of genres here compared to even there that I think you see that even more so in Vancouver than you do elsewhere.
I'm interested to know how many more people there are in Nashville than there are in Vancouver, though.
Oh, quite I think they're like...
Does anyone know the answer?
Someone do the fact check. But I think
the last time I checked it was 30,000 or something. I don't know.
In Nashville?
I could be wrong, and I could be totally misquoting. But I would be interested to know if actually the amount of population is a direct indicator of whether or not you have a focused identity.
True. Could be. That could be.
Because what about New Zealand? There are 3 million people, well, probably 6 now, from when I lived there. There's maybe 5 or 6 million people. Do they have a sound? You could argue that they do.
But I don't think it's population-based. I think it's more, this goes back to the idea of community. Because the Toronto community is so supportive of each other and tight-knit there.
Okay.
I think they're more in line of, again, it's changing even now, so where they're now becoming even more sonically diverse.
Mm-hmm.
I think because of that, you see them breaking out of that mold, because we can see that people, even they themselves, have issues of having the idea of a Toronto sound.
Right.
Nobody would want that, right?
Mm.
And it's funny that people kind of want to have an idea of what does Vancouver sound like. And I think the idea of identity doesn't really make sense in today's age because of that cross-pollination.
Yeah.
Like, I was just going to use an example. Like, you have a kid from Mission, like, known, who's making probably the most cross-breed pop/hip-hop possible right now, right, in the city. Well, in the Lower Mainland, I should say, even in BC. And then you have an act like Manila Grey, which is very R&B hip-hop, and, like, I don't want to say, what's the way to describe it? Like, you can't really describe their music. It's really like a very like a night driving type sound, right? And those artists don't really cross too much, but they're still a part of the Vancouver community, and that's just a range of diversity in hip hop alone compared to all the other genres. Like you look at our rock scene, we had very folksy music back in the day. Maybe might not have called Vancouver home, but had a much different sound even in that like aspect of the genre, right?
He's spitting facts, like facts. Like I don't want to hear a Vancouver artist say "ting" in their song. I don't want to hear a Vancouver artist say "mans." You know what I'm saying? Like, why do you have to talk like that? You're not from where. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's cool to just be cool. Like, you're from Vancouver. That's cool enough. It's like, it's a beautiful place. Like, man, you can talk about that. You can talk about that in your music. Like, how you want to spin it and say it and use your lingo. Like, talk about what's really going on here. Like, you don't have to. I had a conversation with someone like this today. They sent me a music video. I was like, why are there girls with the guns in the video?
Fam.
Why is the girl carrying a gun?
That's the whole topic right there.
Mask on? Like, what the fuck is that, man? That's a whole identity crisis, man. Like, real talk. Jeez, I don't want to see that coming from anyone out of Vancouver. I don't want to hear about none of that talk. I don't want to see none of that in the video. Like, show us some good stuff, man. Make it. Like, that's how we can put Vancouver on the map. Imagine if all the artists were just talking about how dope Vancouver was and how, like, you know what I'm saying? How beautiful the scenery is and weather's not too bad, you know what I'm saying? Like, just talk about some, you know what I'm saying? Just say it sick in your music. Say it in a sick way. Use your artist lingo. You don't have to talk how other people are talking elsewhere. You don't have to rap about what they're talking about. Like, I'm just talking about music. I think a lot of artists out here have an identity crisis, man.
We always talk about like how Vancouver is like one of the greatest cities to live in, and then like no one ever mentions that in their music or anything. It's like, speak about what it actually is. Don't try to act like something you're not, or try to just copy the type of content that they're doing in a different city because it's cool. It's like we have this great culture and we run from it. And I think that's kind of goes back to the point of it just being a bit like scattered, and like just more sensibility of like we need to kind of wear it on our sleeve more and like honor it. And hopefully that starts to change, because I think at least being in this pandemic for the last year, I feel like people are really appreciating being in Vancouver than other cities a lot more. Well, hopefully that gets represented post-pandemic. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
I mean, shit, like you mentioned, like you mentioned that video where it was like Bear Grylls with the ski mask and the guns. I'm like, yo, chances are the kid grew up on the west side too. Like, he comes from money. Like, there's dumb rappers I know who are like, you know, getting like their fake guns and shit and putting the videos. I'm like, fam, you went to Queen Gray, which is like the wealthy high school here. And I'm like relax. It don't make sense. Like, they're too afraid of like what you both said of being themselves and being afraid of the idea of being from Vancouver.
Yeah, but I think I'm curious to hear everyone else's thoughts on that, because I think one person that doesn't get mentioned enough is Baby No Money, because he's kind of really scaled. I mean, if you look at his streams, he has more streams than most people's top tier rappers or artists would have. And so I'm curious to see, well, is it more than just having one person that's successful that will kind of like determine what the sound is, if that makes sense?
I wonder, but like if you look at Toronto, and you look at, you know, that dark filtered sound, that became the sound of them. And The Weeknd, you know, he took R&B and made it coked out and gritty and stuff like that. And a lot of people, including out here, really stuck to that style and used it to build their own things. So obviously it's not going to happen in every situation. And I don't expect people out here just to start making songs that sound like BB No Money. But, you know, I think if there is a certain sonic brand or texture that is working for people, I wouldn't be surprised if people started sticking to that more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we could agree that like the sound of each city just changes all the time.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
If we're lucky,
yeah.
It evolves.
Yeah.
I don't think anything, I think binary thinking and trying to emulate anything, especially in 2020, is not something we want to continue doing.
It sounds really weird to say, but I think a lot of the beauty is in the gray area, like at the end of the day, right? Like that's really how I think we like to present ourselves and like move forward, is that, okay, maybe I'm not this, but maybe I'm somewhere in between.
Maybe
and
we're
that's
all
what makes
jazz.
me dope, right?
Maybe we're still jazz.
Right. What's interesting about the Toronto thing is like the top 3 artists on Spotify, is Drake, Weeknd, and Justin Bieber. And we can all agree that they all have different sounds from one another.
100%.
Yeah.
So it's like, who do we decide whose Toronto sound is?
Yeah, I think I think like we've discussed today, it's like I think it's exciting right now that there isn't a sound because everyone is just making what they want to make, regardless of what the perception of what a Vancouver song should sound like. And only time will tell. But what I foresee happening is once there's more eyes on the city and the artists are starting to gain a lot of traction, Vancouver's identity won't be bound by sound. That's what I like. At least that's what my thought process is. It might be bound by certain styles, certain things visually, but I don't think it'll be bound by sound.
Yeah, I hope not. That would be awesome.
There might be some emigration towards like whatever kind of sound texture that we might come to see more of from different artists. But I don't think, especially with how the industry continues to like move forward in this new generation, I don't think we'll ever really see like what the equivalent of was with that quote unquote Toronto sound.
But let me just clarify though that I'm not saying it would just be limited to artists here clinging to that and saying I'm from Vancouver, I'm going to sound like this. Look at what happened with Party Next Door type R&B, where it's like that's just going to propagate and people everywhere. If something sounds great and it's hitting people flock to that sound. But I think, and it would hopefully become associated with Vancouver. That's what we need. No one is out there being like, oh, this is a Vancouver type vibe. And I think that would actually be a good thing for us. I would love to see it.
Yeah.
I think like going on that point, like that one identity that should be represented in Vancouver is like you get to kind of be yourself, like, and that's really undervalued. You don't have when you start to copy another city is when you kind of get lost in the shuffle. But when you just you're not kind of limited to certain sounds, or like if you hear an artist and they say like a city like Atlanta or Chicago, you kind of already have a preconceived notion of what they're going to sound like, which can be a detriment. When you hear an artist is from Vancouver, you don't know what to expect, which I think is kind of undervalued a bit. So I think artists should definitely, take advantage of that and like just naturally be themselves and more so focus on making the best music possible instead of following a certain type of sound or style.
Why are we using the framework of geographical location anymore? More than anything, the development of, the digitized world just requires none of the geographical situation. However, I do have a very strange theory in my mind that our surroundings affect how we write. Because I'm a songwriter as well. I'm a creative. I'm an actor as well. And where I live colors how I write. And we have mountains and we have oceans and we have so many forces of nature that influence our sound. And I would wager to hope that the landscape of our music is reflective of the surroundings that we have rather than a genre that we decide.
That's awesome way to put it.
That's a good point.
Thanks.
Dope. Okay. So next question comes from KB, and his question is, what's missing in the Vancouver music scene, and is it fair to compare it to Toronto?
No, it's not fair to compare because it's two different cities completely, culturally, size, everything. So I don't think it is fair to compare. And what's missing, I don't think much is missing. I think we're just working on it, right? Like the pieces are there. There's promoters, there's good artists, there's people in offices that can help, artists out. It's just a matter of working together. And I think it's getting there right now.
It's definitely not fair to compare because it's just like Flo said, two whole different cities on two different coasts of an extremely diverse country. So I think that's pretty much it. I don't think we're really missing anything. It's just if the only thing you want to compare is that maybe we're a few years behind in terms of how much growth Toronto has had, but that's it. Even if you retool, kind of the question on itself is, it's not so much is it fair to compare to Toronto, it's more so what can we learn from Toronto, right? Because we're on the West Coast. Like I'd much rather take all their failings and all their winnings and learn from what you can from it, and then apply that to Vancouver and it's the scene and the industry here. Because that way you don't have to go over all the bullshit that they did and continue to grow from that new dollars that you gain from having seen Toronto reach the levels that it has, right? The talent here is like bursting at the seams. Like there's so much talent in Vancouver, like you're gonna see it reach a point where we do start to see Vancouver artists on the world stage. So to the question, I don't think it's fair, but I think it's good to learn from Toronto.
Toronto looked very similar to Vancouver at one point as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Keep in mind, we're a lot smaller of a city than Toronto. I think anytime you follow the path of other cities, other like cultures and scenes, it's not going to work. It needs to be authentic to what we're doing, and that takes time. It needs to be genuine. You can't force it. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, you're right, SJ. We're a little bit late, but like who cares? You know, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there at one point. Toronto was like that at one point, and then few artists, Drake, Weeknd really blew up, and it was kind of like the floodgates opened up, and then we started to see more collaboration within the city. But like that's also happening in Vancouver as well. There's going to be artists that are going to take the next level and shine more light in the city. I know like one of my personal goals is like I want this city to be big enough. Well, it already is with talent, but to a point where record labels and publishing companies, et cetera, will want to open up offices here in Vancouver because it's such an exciting city. And I think at one point it's going to be like that. It's just going to take a bit of time to get there.
Mm-hmm. It's curious you actually say that last point because we used to have Warner Music satellite office, and we used to have a Universal satellite office too. Both of those went away in like the span of a couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still the one in Victoria, but that's more like back end stuff. It's not really like, artist based.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say it's not fair to compare. And the difference between Toronto and Vancouver, definitely Toronto's a lot bigger in size because like the different cities and like boroughs they've got like so many different artists in all of the like different like over like 500 to like 1,000, I'd say, different artists in a lot of the different boroughs and stuff like that. In Vancouver, if you look at the different pockets, you can find a certain amount, but I don't know if it's as many. I wouldn't want to throw Drake as a comparison in because we do have some pretty big artists out here in Vancouver as well, and like I want to echo the same message that like the record labels, they're just not here, so that's a missing piece to help some of the artists that need more exposure and especially like help with distribution. So that would be one of the pieces that would be, I'd say, is missing. But even though artists are independent and able to do their own thing, the help from the distribution is helpful as well.
I don't get the comparison at all. I feel like it's not fair to compare it to anything. I mean, it's its own thing. Let's just see what it presents. Let's see what it comes up with. In the same way, for Toronto to be Toronto and come up with that sound, no one is comparing it to anything else.
Yeah, I think like comparing to Toronto, I think like there's definitely, and we kind of touched on it, there's definitely like a culture and like identity problem here. I feel like that's changing a bit, but I think like cities like Toronto just have more like unified neighborhoods and like villages and businesses that are more like minority owned and represented. So there's much more representation in a city like Toronto, whereas Vancouver is like definitely lacking in that and like almost has somewhat of a identity crisis. And I think that's kind of deeply rooted in a lot of the stuff we touched in. Like there is like a bigger like racist like kind of history in Vancouver as well. Like you think about examples like the destruction of Hogan's Alley or just like miseducation or lack of education for like Indigenous people here in BC. That kind of just left things a bit scattered, and like there's a great culture in some places. I mean, for example, like we have like a lot of culture in like brown and Asian communities, but I think everything is kind of lacking when you compare it, especially to Toronto. So and musically, I think that combines because sometimes that puts less onus on the artist to represent their city when they have less of a cultural connection to their city. And that's why you may see like Toronto artists put on for their city or neighborhood more than Vancouver, because there needs just to be a little bit more identity, I feel like. And I think that's definitely starting to change, especially in the hip hop field, I feel like.
Also depends on what genres you're talking about, right? Like I feel like, yeah, sure, like rap, you know, there's more of that in Toronto, but you know, like here it's like you have lots of like techno and house artists as well. So it really depends on what genres you're talking about. And it's quite different based on the genre. Vancouver had like a thriving like industrial scene, like punk scene, you know, so it really depends on what kind of genre of music you're talking about.
Yeah, our rock, indie, and EDM scene goes crazy here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what they said, I kind of agree with. I don't think it's fair because Toronto's culturally different, so we can't compare ourselves to somewhere that's totally different to where we're from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Does Toronto compare themselves to Atlanta? I don't know. But what was I gonna say? I lost that one.
I was actually gonna say though, like there definitely was a lot of vibes / like questions / quote unquote tastemakers, if you would, as outdated that term is, in Toronto, that used to be like, hey, we'll put it this way, the rap that was coming out early was often compared to New York. They're like, can we be as good as New York? Just because of the proximity basis, right? And over time, they kind of shed that and realize, hey, we need to be us. We need to be who we think we are and what we think Toronto is. So go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say that I'm glad I don't make comparisons. I don't hold us to any sort of bar set by Toronto, but I did. And I do view the success that Toronto has seen as very positive, just being a Canadian in general, especially someone who makes rap music, R&B music. It's not like Canada was known as, you know, a breeding ground for those kind of acts. But we've seen recently, you know, Toronto has bred Canadian artists that are literally the biggest artists in the world for, you know, coming on a decade now. So I think that bodes really well for us. And I think that's taken away some of the stigma from being a Canadian artist. So that's really good for us.
This comes from Seb, also known as Cherry Blue, a local producer here in Vancouver. He had a question about why don't we see more things like remix projects over here in Vancouver? Because Ontario still has the Ontario Arts Foundation, which is the equivalent of Creative BC. They have, well, it's more cityfied, that's a word. Toronto Music Foundation, which is basically Music BC for Toronto. Those equivalents are already covered in other provinces throughout Canada. Obviously, it varies per province. Again, use an example like a true schooling system like Remix Project, which is also a nonprofit. Like, why, just as a broad question, why don't we have that? And maybe how can we see about bringing that in? Because before we get into the answers here, speaking personally, they're supposed to come back this year. And that was supposed to be in May. And Annalie and Gavin, who basically run Remix, were like, yeah, we want to come back and actually start the programs here like they did in, I think Chicago was the second city. But obviously the pandemic hit, so we'll see what happens next year. But even outside of the specific example of Remix, why don't we see more programs like that for music?
It's a tough question, man.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there should be too.
Because the people in the powers to do that are not doing that. I told you I had meetings with people who work for the city, and that was one idea that I brought up to them. Why hasn't that been done? Mm-hmm. We can't have a remix project, because even when we do get a remix project, it's going to be some white man from over there or some white woman from over there who's in charge of it. And it's going to, you know what I'm saying? It's just going to be some next bullshit, man.
I think that running a poll would be a good idea, like actually polling the people in the city.
But that's the thing. I mean, the answer would be a resounding yes, right? Because you even look at when they were at Fortune for the 3-day workshop, it was fucking booked. Like, there was a waiting list for like another 100 people too. And you had, even like I myself, when I went, I was lucky to get in because I was shortlisted and got in, I think, 4 or 5 days before the actual release of the workshops. Stepping away from it was one of the best experiences I had, and I actually made those personal connections.
Yeah, no, because for me personally, like I would say that, I mean, anyone that is wanting to do music in whatever facet you want to do it, I think that something like that would just be beneficial. So, I mean, I don't know why we don't have it, but like the idea itself is super dope. And like, for me, like, I just don't know why it isn't already a thing. Like, that's for real for me anyway.
I feel that. Like I feel like the reason why it's not happening here in Vancouver too is like the rent of places like to host like a
True.
like a actual physical place that people can come into. That's one thing that's holding a lot of people back. That's the biggest
Yeah.
part of what is necessary to have a community space like that, or like what Montreal and Toronto are doing with Remix. Yeah, like we just and it's been a problem too. Like Vancouver's been known as you pay the most for rent anywhere in the city. So yeah, we'd have to figure out how to get a space to host that.
And I was going to say, just for context too, because they were here back in like December or January or something of like 2018.
Who Remix Project when they came, right?
Yeah, when they came. So they were here like whatever it was, like a year and a half.
Oh, even take it in. So even when they did come, right, and they had some Vancouver speakers, what speakers did they have that worked in our music scene?
Were you even there? I can't remember. Like,
did I go? I pulled up, yeah, because I went to meet Gavin, who's like one of the after.
And I was gonna say,
and they were doing. They wanted to bring it. Yeah. Who from our Vancouver music scene?
It was like the only person that comes to mind that I remember was like Alvi, and that was it. Sorry, Alvaro. From
but is that music
audience.
scene or is that you like? Is that really? Like, okay, no, I'd say him now because I know they're working with Blueprint, but
see, you mentioned that was actually after they made that deal.
That was after,
exactly, right? Yeah. But like there was no music BC, there was no factory, there was nobody there. Like it was mostly like Murder Beats and all the other people from outside of Vancouver were there.
When you see these Remix Project talks happening in Toronto, there's people from the music scene. We spoke about earlier what the music scene or having a job in music is. When they came and done that here, it was people who have a job in music. You got someone from there who works at Blueprint as a that's not music scene. And he's up there talking about, this is how I started getting into promoting and music. Like, fam, what are you talking about, fam? We're talking about the music scene. Why don't you have producers up there? Why don't you have people who own studios up there? Why don't you have managers up there? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I was looking back at it.
And it's because those people over there at the Remix, they don't know what's going on the ground level over there. So they reach out to their connect from 5, 6, 7 years ago. Oh, we're going to bring our thing over there. We want to get some music people. And then they're just going to speak. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me get you who works with us, you who owns this club, you who does this, you who does this. And none of them work in the music scene. None of them have been in a studio with an artist from here ever.
Yeah, again, just for context, so people
roll out or anything. So why are you up on there talking to us about the music scene?
100%.
Remember, one of the topics was actually the music scene, the hip hop and R&B music scene in Vancouver. That was one of the topics.
Yeah, and I don't think there was a single. No, Chin was up there. Chin was the only person from Vancouver who was actually up on that stage at the time, if I remember. But just for context,
how many guys has Chin really worked with? I seen him in the studio with Manila Grey one time, but that's because Manila Grey was blowing up. You don't get credit for that. You don't get credit for working with people once they're on their way. It's evident that you can look at Manila Grey and be like, okay, yeah, they're on their way. But how many people has he worked with from ground level, from zero? And if there is anybody, let it be known, because we don't know.
But no, sorry, I was going to say, just to bring it back to the question for context, like Johnny just said, like literally what happened was Annalie, who runs Remix, reached out to G-Man, who used to be your mentor, and then G-Man was the one who ended up connecting everybody at Remix. And again, like shout outs to these people, but they're not actually in the music scene. Like G-Man runs Slash Apparel, like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's a wholesale distributor thing, but he also owns Fortune too. He also owns Fortune too. But even that, owning a club is not enough to be in the music scene. The club is not the music scene. This is the only city that I've ever heard of that the club is part of the music scene. Back home, you don't even talk about clubs. I don't know what clubs, what the clubs are called back home. That's not where I don't know. That's not the music scene. That's so far away from it. That's like 0.1% of the music scene, because that's where your music might get played. But there's so many other things to do in the music scene. It's not just the club. You know what I'm saying? Half the time, none of you DJs in the club are playing Vancouver music anyways. Other DJs from other cities are not doing that. It's a pride in it. There's a pride in it, son. Where you're from, play the music from where you're from. Can't tell me there's not 10. But pull up a track list right now. I bet I can tell you there's tracks on there from Vancouver artists that are better than some of those tracks. You could have spanned more tracks than one, two tracks. Innit? So it comes from other people too. It's the DJs too. Where's the pride from the DJs? Well, how come the DJs here have more pride playing songs from artists that they don't know and will never ever know in their life ever? This artist is not going to DM them and say, "Yo, thanks, bro, for playing my track at Fortune." They're never going to say that. Play some track from some artists that you know, that you actually going to meet and run into and buck into. Like, that's weird, man. That's weird.
No, so that's what I was gonna say too. I think this is because I've been in Toronto, I've been in LA. Like the one thing that is of note of difference here, people here in the club scene are like, I'm in the music scene. Like nah, everywhere else, nightlife is nightlife.
No.
And I'm like, I don't think you really
nightlife.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, I don't think people realize the difference here. It's like it's just because you have the ability to put on an artist on your stage doesn't make you a part of the industry. And it goes back to our earlier point is like, now that there's this much more transparency, like I've seen on the flip side, promoters act mad dumb and book it was like a female, gorgeous, right? Singer as well, average artist, has like 40,000, 50,000 followers. So they thought, oh, she's going to pack the place out. Pulled up and did a show. There was like 50 people there. And I'm like nightlife is falling behind the music scene, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. In Vancouver, I don't know how it is elsewhere, but like that's another issue too, where I think we need to separate the idea of, because there's still artists right now who are like, I want to get played at, or I want to do a slot at Fortune or Celebs. And don't get it twisted. Those are dope venues, but your goal shouldn't be, I want to get played in the club. Like, what the fuck? Like, it's like, I want to get played on some radio station in like Nelson. Like, it's this, you're going to get the same traction. It's not going to make you any difference. Like, you think mans are at the club listening to your shit? like, oh, this is a brand new Vancouver artist. I'm going to go home and I'm going to Shazam this right now while I'm dancing in the club. Right? Like, you don't see that.
All right, so moving on, we have this question here. And Denise, we'll start with you, but do you think, but is there a good way for us to keep stages and live venues in the city, especially with a lot of the like clubs and different venues making more money on VIP and bottle services? Especially, I guess this is like post-pandemic, just, but yeah, Denise, do you think there's a way for us to keep stages and live venues in the city moving forward?
Oh yeah, I've seen so many different ways, like even like the UK where they have their little pods and they have, or the drive-in ones where people can like actually check out a show and be like in their pods, like they're safe 6 or safe how many people they're allowed. I know Vancouver was doing a great job in the summer too with the Mural Festival, how they would like have 2 separate shows and people would come in and you just sit down and you watch the show. So yeah, there's definitely ways, but in the winter time, I'm wondering how that could work. But I'm sure like people could do short shows on stage outside. Like, just like tell your network you're going to be at the spot outside, like near the beach, like Sunset Beach or whatever. set up real quick, tear down real fast, and then have a little show. So I see it being possible because I own my own equipment and it's easy like to grab a generator real quick. You can have these little pop-up shows anywhere basically. And Vancouver, we have like the best weather in not the world, but like next to California and all that. We have more advantage to being outside. So, we could wear our goose downs, go outside and definitely check a show. And our networks would definitely want to follow that. So I feel Vancouver is a good spot to have outdoor shows.
For sure. As long as cops don't shut us down. That's all it is. Yeah. If you can bring more value than a bottle table, like a VIP service table, then yeah. Like, that's how we approached our party at Fortune. But like, take the example of the OVO night, right? If they didn't have that stage, you think Drake being / Roy Woods and whoever else was there being at a VIP table is going to bring the same traction? No. But what about the rest of the year, right? The other 364 days, like, I get it, because you make that much more money by having a VIP table, but I'm not a venue owner either, so I can't really tell you if it's worth that investment, right?
I think they're screwed until people can start going to clubs again. Then it's business as normal.
Exactly.
But until then, I don't know. Keep those CERB checks coming. That's a tough. I feel for the live people. There's no answer except for just waiting it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely need more music venues. We definitely do have some in our city, but I think we need more. It would be cool if we got more support, specifically financial support from the government through these times for these venues to keep them open, because it's obviously very important. It adds to the culture. But I mean, Fortune, just as an example, is kind of like the hip hop mecca of Vancouver. So many incredible artists have gone through there and performed. It's like a space where people kind of come together to see live music. Celebrities is a great one for more house EDM. So we definitely do have those venues, but we would like to see a little bit, obviously more. But the reality is Vancouver is just such an expensive city that we're going to need to gain that support from our province and our country to make that happen, I think. Yeah, again, that's a little bit out of what I do, but like that would be my take on it. I would really love to see more pure like live music venues in our city.
I mean, we're just waiting for shows to come back. You know, we're not gonna do no live stream. Like you said, no one wants to watch no live stream or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't really connect. So just waiting until we get back to normal, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
As depressing as it sounds, like, yeah, there's not much we can do, but like, wait.
What else can you do?
Like, people, exactly. People like, when are you gonna do a show? I'm like, what? Would you want me to put a fucking live stream on and you're just chilling at home? Like, it's not the same. Like, when we do shit, you go there, you remember because you saw the art that was on the wall, you saw the fashion show that was happening, you saw the artist. Like, it sounds corny, but like, you know, like reaching into something for like real and putting on one of the best performances like live. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna get that. So you just gotta wait. I mean, fingers crossed, vaccine like sometime next year. We'll be back into the summer, but that's all I can say right now is just wait.
Yes, sir.
But yo, just to touch up on what I was saying though, like I put on a lot of my own self-produced events at these so-called bottle service clubs because I had a relationship with the people, the managers, the people who own it or whatever, and I expressed to them my idea that I want to collaborate this nightclub bottle service vibe with more music, like performers hosting, performing or whatever, and bringing a crowd that's there for the music opposed to like popping bottles, right? And I've had some pretty successful events because the collaboration of the two is like, it's fire.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, the last thing we did was in that same way where it was like, it's like, hey, this is still be a regular club night, but we're going to do we have the prime slot, which is, I'm sure you will know, like rare for them to give away. Yeah. We had after midnight until 1 to do music. So we're like, let's run it.
Yeah, dude. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I miss it.
100%. Some crazy nights we've had there, but yeah. I mean, in general, like you said, like Fortune, Celebs, there's some really strong venues in our city with a lot of history to them.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so the next question comes from Kiara, and her question is, what does representing Vancouver mean to you?
I to be honest, nothing especially. I just want to make dope music with my friends and keep trying to elevate. I don't really, I'm from Vancouver and I love my city, but it comes down more to the art and just the people. So I don't personally tie that to Vancouver, especially. I'm just making music.
I just pride myself. So wherever I reside, I'm down to put on the map. That's it for me. Like, that's really it, to be honest. I pride myself in putting out good content and just, putting good stuff out into the world. So wherever I reside, I'm gonna rep for. When I happen to reside in Vancouver right now. So
I don't really know how to answer that, to be honest. But I don't know. I'm proud of my city. I'm excited about my city. I think I mentioned it before. I think we're in a very exciting time. I know we're in a pandemic, but I mentioned this before, but we're seeing other genres flourish and we're seeing people come together and support, and that's all you can really ask. So it's like, yeah, it's dope and I'm proud. And like for me, I'm in a position where I can help a lot of music creators as an A&R. So whether that's doing things for them creatively, connecting them with other songwriters, artists, producers from other places around the world, specifically Canada, or supporting them financially with the advances that we do, making sure that they're collecting royalties from their music that they make, I'm highly active in my city, and I'm making sure that I'm tapping into every nook and cranny in this scene and building these relationships so I can help support our artists. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me, I guess.
I think it means making Vancouver the best it can be, and then especially being a creative, you know what lies underneath the surface. You know what the value the city has, the ability it has to cultivate and to add that extra essence to the scene, to the creative scene, to any alley it lives on. So I definitely think what does Vancouver mean to me and why I put it on my back is because it's home, and it's like a ride or die. It can do the job, and we definitely just have to prove that to the world. And it's definitely been making a statement, but I think that's because we're all slowly unifying, and as we unify as a collective and creatives every day, that just puts Vancouver more and more in the scene, because now we're all speaking the same language and using one voice. So
I can see even from like the personal conversations I've had. I had a meeting, I think it was like maybe a week into the pandemic, with somebody from Universal. I mean, it happened to be Universal in New York, but again, the same thing applies. They're like people are starting to know Vancouver for their music, for its music, I should say. We used to be, oh, that city that hosted the Olympics or is super pretty and you can go skiing in mountain, blah, blah, all the same shit in the same day. People always say, right? Like, that's amazing. Let's not get it twisted. That's a huge source of inspiration for a lot of artists. But directly to the music, I think the representation of what our artists present to the world is starting to get out there more and more over time. And I think you can't really say, like, the question itself is like, what does it mean to represent Vancouver? I think our exports and artists here do that in nature for us. I think they are truly what you can look at as, oh, this is what Vancouver is producing and what it's inspiring. Especially when you look at acts who have a lot of external following. Like, one of our biggest acts here is Vanilla Grey. The amount of traction they have overseas, like, they just came back from I think it was end of February? Was there international tour? And you look at the numbers there, that's insane. And in speaking again of representation, ironically enough, Vancouver was one of the last dates for their international tour to sell out, and it was at Fortune.
I was actually it was this time last year. I was in Calgary, and then I went to their concert, and it was sold out. The whole crowd was singing their lyrics. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Snotty Nose Res Kids too. They're Wolf BC group as well. But yeah, to think about BC or Vancouver, sorry, as like what we bring, I'd say like our uniqueness, like just seeing what people come with. Like, you don't have to show the mountains or the skyline or the bridge, Lionsgate Bridge in your video. You can just tell that lots of stuff is done in Vancouver, or the Science World. Like, that's a lot of things that the basic videos have. But like, yeah, definitely showing your uniqueness. And if you don't even have to show what like any of the landmarks in Vancouver. People can hear the sound and just know that it's a Vancouver kind of sound, because it's a unique sound coming out of Vancouver right now too. So I definitely want to highlight that Vancouver has its own uniqueness.
For me, it's like a fuck it, do it yourself spirit, like unlike, like New York or like maybe even Toronto or Montreal, like if you have an idea, probably somebody has done it already. Whereas in Vancouver, if you have an idea, you probably just have to get your hands dirty and just figure it out and like put your show on and put it together. I feel like it comes from like a DIY kind of like attitude, just because we have so little infrastructure for music and for art here. So, I feel like it's, the attitude is like, you have to pioneer a scene, or you have to pioneer, like a trend or a wave, which I feel like that's kind of like that's the thing I feel like with Vancouver that is kind of different than other cities, is that like you just have to do it yourself here. Be your own manager, be your own whatever event producer, promoter, be your own artist and stuff, curator, and just like run your own thing yourself. But there's space for that here, right? Because we don't have like all this like more corporate kind of competition and stuff like that. That's why we have a thriving DIY scene. And that's why we have thriving experimental sounds that are coming out of Vancouver.
The way I look at it is just like, I'm not from Vancouver. I love the city. The people that I create with and the people that I'm around inspire me. And as long as we're doing something that we like, that we enjoy, I think, you know, if people look at that and be like, okay, that represents Vancouver, then great. And if not, then that's also fine too. It's just kind of like, yeah, we're just doing what we want to do, how we want to do it. We enjoy what we're doing. It's as simple as that.
I do identify as Canadian, though. I think I take pride in making Canadian content. I think it's a bit more macro like that. I don't really see myself as making Vancouver content, but I do see myself as making Canadian content.
It also comes down to mind state too, where like, yeah, it's dope to represent where you're from, but you also don't want to start to be labeled the Vancouver rapper. Or I think again, like it goes to a conversation that me and Buck had, is to label yourself as, look, I'm a local rapper from Vancouver. Like, your goals should be, if this is what you're really about and what you really want to pursue, speaking of music specifically, you need to, of course, show where you're from, show the love of it, but you never want to be limited by where you're from, as fucked up as that sounds, to put simply. So I think the idea of representation comes more so from what inspires you from where you live, right? Like, I think that's how you really represent your city, is that if you're making dope music, and to put simply, if you caught a vibe somewhere where you felt like, okay, I was on Granville Street, hit the studio, and I was like, this is the vibe that was on that night, that's a better representation of Vancouver than saying, oh, yeah, I'm from Surrey, I'm from blah, blah, I'm from Vancouver. But like, I think that's less relevant to people, and frankly, arguably less relevant to the artists. It's really just what benefits from the city are there that make you who you are, right? I think that matters more than continuing to represent your home sound type thing. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that's kind of the topic of this panel, but I don't think a lot of people are really thinking of it that way. So I don't really want to overemphasize that, really. People are just creating.
Mm-hmm.
No, for sure. And it's so true how, like, and I'm sure this is probably similar for all of you, but if you were to have like everyone that you create like art with, and you were able to go somewhere else, you would just be somewhere else, but you would still be doing the same thing with like the same group of people. So I feel like it's more about the people who are working together towards something than the location that you are per se, and we just happen to be in Vancouver. So
exactly, like don't get it twisted either. Like, I want to see as much growth here as possible, but it doesn't have to mean it stays here. You know what I mean? Like, we can continue to grow outside of the city and grow the city at the same time. Like, we'll have our own infrastructure, we'll have our own spaces that will always support dope content, dope experiences, but it really should be, what are you doing that represents where you're from the best, and how far is that going to take you, and how far will the idea of, well, I just ended there. I was gonna say the idea of Vancouver taking you there, but really, at the end of the day, like, put it simply, Bozzy's from Chilliwack, Manila's from Richmond, Coulter's from Surrey, Jamie's up in North Van. Like, even like that, people are like, hey, where are you from? Most of these people just say Vancouver instead of saying those suburbs when they're in certain rooms. So I don't think it's really a matter of identifying themselves as a representative of Vancouver, and more saying like, hey, check out my stuff, and I happen to be from the Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
That's the better way to do it, I think.
And it's those experiences as someone from Vancouver or someone in Vancouver that influence your art, of course. So the influence is always there. It's just, is it in your conscious thought all the time? Probably not.
Exactly.
I think it just means like pushing the culture forward. I think like we've kind of touched on before, but I think it means like being actually in the music scene and the community, not just treating it like a job. I mean, Opposition is a global company. Like, we do work with artists not just in Canada and US, but like France and Brazil and wherever. So like, it doesn't, like, location matters less than it does today with in terms of like who we work with. But in terms of like myself, like personally, I'm always gonna like represent my city and like where I'm from and like where I'm currently residing, and like want to see the changes that will just make it better and give back to the community as well, and making sure kind of collaborating more with people here and making sure that companies are giving back as well to kind of get Vancouver to the place we want it to be, just as a music city that it deserves to be.
For me personally, like even when I'm out here and I'm doing stuff, like I still consider myself an outsider, even though I'm working with Vancouver artists. Because like even for me initially, it's always been like artists from the valley, just because even when I'm out there, if I go to studios out there or if I'm talking with musicians out there, everyone sort of knows each other, and I guess that's growing too in Vancouver as well. But like everyone out there sort of knows each other, so it's like there's always like a sense of like collaboration and like camaraderie out there. So I feel like for me, like I'm always gonna rep the valley. Like even when I'm out here, people ask me where I'm from, I'm saying from Abbotsford. So like, you know what I mean? So for me, like I just really enjoy like the relationships and like the musicians that I've come to know out there. And I feel like just being an outsider looking at the Vancouver scene, I really see that from an outsider, because sometimes when you're in it, you're sort of doing your own thing and you can get blinded to how like the city's moving. But being an outsider, I kind of like that perspective because I'm seeing it while also being in it too. So yeah.
It's crazy now that you actually say that. I feel like a lot of us, especially who are part of this discussion, like because we kind of do it day in and day out, you tend to maybe not celebrate the wins as much, right? Because you're in it and you see it and you're like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing that you want to do? But like with the pandemic happening, like I had a second to take a look back and I was like, yo, the stuff that we, like not we as like Two Green, but like as a city have done in the past like 5 years, it's insane. Like, and there's so much more that's still to happen. Like imagine what we'll be in another 5 years, right?
Definitely.
Dope. All right, so just moving along to a question from Stephen G. Okay, and currently, yeah, everyone that's a part of this call right now is currently doing this, but their question was, what role do we play at this table in making Vancouver the world's next hub for music? Denise, if you want to start with that one.
Okay, yeah, being a hub for Vancouver, definitely, yeah, like the outreach is always paramount in what I'm doing. And like I've said before too, staying consistent, like with the show being 8 years running, you know, I feel like I'm here to stay. I don't want to be going anywhere, you know, and people can always reach out. Being the hub, I would say, branching out, because one person will tell you about this one person, and then you meet a whole new network that you never would have thought you would have met in like just being on your own. So I find that is really helpful with branching the network out and becoming a hub, because leaving Vancouver is always like the goal. People want to get known around the world, and in Canada as well, Toronto, Montreal, even Saskatchewan, all the provinces in between. So yes, definitely, I'd say that making sure to be consistent and listening to and being genuine with your network.
Well, for me personally, you know, I work with a lot of emerging artists, and I'm kind of interested in doing that and in providing the infrastructure for that, for like emerging talent or like emerging event organizers. Because you know, I have a DIY space, so I co-host a lot of shows. Like I think last year we put on like 52 artists in my studio, and I think my role is to like, you know, work with emerging artists and emerging organizers so they can continue and feel motivated and feel like they have agency to like continue doing the work that they do. And also like I advocate for like equity, like with the city, with grant funders. Like I think it's important for us as organizers to participate and to be political and to participate in that way, because if we don't advocate for ourselves, like no one's going to do it. So I think as organizers, you have the ability to see the bigger picture in many sense, and that we should like advocate. we should participate, we should speak to council, we should we should call out things that are like, problematic. We should, fight for more equitable working conditions for entertainers in the nightlife industry. Yeah, I think it's music is supposed to be an art form of resistance, we can't forget that and let it wash away with all this capitalism shit of making money. That's not the point. Music was out there as a form of resistance, against racism, sexism, or homophobia and things like that. And we have to stay true to that too, because music as art is meant to create social change.
Yeah, I think it's really ironic because everyone at this table and who's involved with this press play discussion is, for the most part, behind the scenes. The thing is, the people like us tend to push the talent forward that's here. And I think what makes Vancouver the next hub for music / getting the world's attention is really pushing and supporting that talent. Because at the end of the day, the more general audiences always will skew towards the musician themselves, right? So I think our job as organizers / content producers / organizational bodies / DJs, right, is to continue to push and also collaborate with these artists and talent, right? I'd rather see them get as much shine as they can, because no matter what, I'm not using the example because we spoke on it before, it's not a good comparison, but you look at the Drakes and the Weekends, right? After they had blown up in Toronto, there was that much more attention on Toronto from an international basis. And not saying that we need that same level of one artist blowing up, but by having this new age / generation of talent get more eyes and more growth / expansion in their brand, will in turn have more attention in Vancouver, and people will start to check more for Vancouver artists because the talent is here. I think a lot of people outside of the province really sleep on how much is really brewing here right now. Putting it into in context, talent wise, Vancouver's up there with the LAs, the New Yorks, Torontos, etc. We have it here. We just maybe don't have the infrastructure and all that to support it, to push them to the next level yet. But holy shit, the talent is fucking here right now.
He says you always on your phone. Tonight there's no distractions. I could tell you need a dose. I see how you be acting. Talking reckless, offside. Girl, you do too much. Bring that ass here, I'm shut you up.